receive him with honor in Jesus. Let's give him another hand.
Morning, everybody. How's everybody doing today? Come on. You know, just picking up where Pastor just left off in that time of exhortation, what's funny is that I felt the same thing that Pastor was feeling. And I was just like, all right, Lord, I don't got that grace, so how are we going to do this? But the Lord did what he had to do, and so I'm really thankful for that because it's going to tie in with my message. And the last few weeks, months, we've been experiencing revival here at Life Church. It's been crazy, it's been insane, and it's something that I know everybody has felt when they walk into the room. But how do we build revival? How do we make sure that we're ready for revival? And so the title of my sermon today is Faith for Revival. And I just would like to thank Pastor for this opportunity. He texted me, he's like, I know you got a word. And I was like, nah, I don't. And then the Lord was just like, yo, boy, stop playing. And I'm just like, all right, I'll stop playing, I'll stop. So that's why I'm here today. Shout out to my boo. You know, this even happening is just a testament of faith. Having somebody who can hold you down, not just in love, but in prayer and all the spiritual things. So, thank you. And then I'd like to shout out my mom, who's in the building today. The GOAT, the senior Mrs. Charles, that's what I call her. But yeah, let's go ahead and let's dive right in. So, the word revival, right? It comes from the Hebrew word shaya, and it means to bring back to life, to restore to consciousness, or to restore to a previous condition, right? Revival can only happen when we as God's people are prepared and our hearts are ready for it. If our hearts are ready for it, if our hearts aren't ready for it, and we're not stirred, then the Lord can't have revival. And I know a lot of us, most of us have grown up in a church setting, and we only think that revival is tangible in the building. Revival is not only tangible in the building. We can have our own personal revivals and things that we're seeking the Lord for, as long as our hearts are open and our hearts are willing. And so here are some ways that revival happens when God's people are prepared, right? We have to make sure that we are constantly seeking the Lord. We have to make sure that we are always open and expressing ourselves to him, letting him know that we are ready for what you have for us. Because, you know, faith for revival doesn't just mean, you know, the Lord moving. How much of us need faith for revival in our finances, in our marriages, in our relationships, on our jobs? We need revival in all these areas, but in order for the revival to take place, we have to have faith. So is your faith ready for the revival that you're seeking? Are you having faith in your heart and you don't believe that God will show? Because we can think something, but we don't believe it in our heart. If we don't believe it in our heart, then it won't manifest. And that's one of the ways that we're going to receive revival. All right, so the first passage of scripture that we are going to go through is Daniel chapter 3, and I'm going to be reading from the New Living Translation. And I'm going to start from 1 and then go to 6. King Nebuchadnezzar made a gold statue 90 feet tall and 9 feet wide. That's tall. And he set it up on the plain of Dura in the province of Babylon. And then he sent to the high officers, officials, governors, advisors, treasurers, judges, magistrates, and all the provisional officials to come to the dedication of the statue he had set up. So all these officials came and stood before the statue King Nebuchadnezzar had set up. Then a herald shouted out, "People of all races and nations and languages, listen to the king's command. When you hear the sound of the horn, the flute, the zither, the lyre, the harp, pipes, and other musical instruments bow to the ground to worship King Nebuchadnezzar's gold statue. Anyone who refuses to obey will immediately be thrown into a blazing furnace. Now let's go down to verse 12. But there are some Jews, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, whom you have put in charge of the province of Babylon. They pay no attention to you, your majesty. This is what his governors were telling him. They refuse to serve your gods and do not worship the gold statue you have set up. Then Nebuchadnezzar flew into a rage, ordered that Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego be brought before him. When they were brought in, Nebuchadnezzar said to them, "Is it true, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, that you refuse to serve my gods or to worship the gold statue I have set up? I will give you one more chance to bow down and worship the statue I have made when you hear the sound of the musical instruments. But if you refuse, you will be thrown immediately into the blazing furnace, and then what God will be able to rescue you from your power?" Is my favorite part right here. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego replied, "O Nebuchadnezzar, we do not need to defend ourselves before you. If we are thrown before the blazing furnace, the God whom we serve is able to save us. He will rescue us from your power. But even if he doesn't," this is the part right here, "we want to make it clear to you, your majesty, that we will never serve your gods or worship the gold statue you have set up." Nebuchadnezzar was so furious with Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego that he became distorted with rage. He commanded that the furnace be heated 7 times hotter than usual. Then he ordered some of the strongest men of his army to bind Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego and throw them into the blazing furnace. So they tied them up and threw them into the furnace, fully dressed in their pants, turbans, robes, and other garments. I want to stop right here. So a lot of us got kids in the room, right? You know when you get the pajamas from the Children's Place or Carter's, it says, "Don't put near fire"? I don't want to find out what's going to happen. So imagine if they got clothes on and it says, "Don't put near fire," and you throw them into that fire. All right. That's the only illustration that came to my place. I'm just like, why would children's clothes say "don't put near fire"? But it makes sense. And from 22, and because the king in his anger had demanded such a hot fire in the furnace, the flames killed the soldiers as they threw the 3 men in. So Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, securely tied, fell into the roaring flames. But suddenly, Nebuchadnezzar jumped up in amazement and exclaimed to his advisors, "Didn't we tie up 3 men and throw them into the furnace?" "Yes, your majesty, we certainly did," they replied. "Look," Nebuchadnezzar shouted, "I see 4 men unbound, walking around in the fire unharmed, and the 4th looks like a god." Then Nebuchadnezzar came as close as he could to the door of the flaming furnace and shouted, "Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, servants of the Most High God, come out, come here." So Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego stepped out of the fire. Then the high officers, officials, governors, and advisors crowded around them and saw that the fire had not touched them. Not a hair on their heads was singed, and their clothing was not scorched. They didn't even smell of smoke. Then Nebuchadnezzar said, "Praise to the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. He sent his angels to rescue his servants who trusted in him. They defied the king's commandment and were willing to die than serve or worship any god except their own God. Therefore, I make this decree. If any people, whatever their race, nation, or language, speak a word against the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, they will be torn limb from limb, and their houses will be turned into heaps of rubble. There is no other God who can rescue like this." Then the king promoted Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego to even higher positions in the province of Babylon. Faithful revival. When I read this scripture, when I was putting this together, the Lord instantly gave me Daniel chapter 3. And I'm just like, all right, like I know the story, but like, how does this relate? And it relates in so much ways in seeking faith for revival. Faith for revival is not knowing the outcome, but knowing that God will show up. These boys went into the fire not knowing what the outcome was going to be, but they knew that God was going to show up. And even if he didn't show up, they were fine with the outcome of what would happen. And that's something that we need to hold on to in seeking faith for revival. We need to be confident in the fact that the Lord will show up. And even if he doesn't show up at this very moment, he's going to show up one way or another. Like, I got countless testimonies about I needed something now, and I'm just like, all right, Lord, you didn't do it. But then in the blink of an eye, it's done, right? Faith for revival. If we can't always be deterred by something not happening when we want it. Remember, God always has the final say. So in seeking faith for revival, we have to make sure that we're continually trusting in him, that he always has our best interest at heart. Like he knows what's going to happen before we even know that it's going to happen. So if we have faith in him and we trust him, the revival we're seeking is going to come. And listen to this part. By putting their faith in God, they were change agents for revival to happen in Babylon. So verse 28, what did Nebuchadnezzar say? He said, there we go. Praise to the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. He sent his angels to rescue his servants who trusted him. They defied my command, the king's, my command, and were willing to die rather than to serve or worship any God except their own God, right? Sometimes when we're seeking faith for revival, it's being in a space of being uncomfortable. Faith is not easy, right? People make faith to, seem like, oh, you believe you're going to receive. Nah, faith is not easy. Faith is something that allows us to push, press, seek the Lord, and go further. Because if we really want it, we got to act like we really want it. We can't say, oh, we want something, and it's just like, we chilling and we just strolling and just like, I don't really want it. No, if I want this car, I'm going to believe and do everything that I want to get this car. I want this apartment, I'm going to believe that I want this apartment. I want this job, I'm doing everything I need so God can know that my faith is ready to accept the revival of receiving this job. And then the next part is, even in Nebuchadnezzar's mature age, revival stirred his heart to acknowledge the one and true living God. I want to park right here for a minute. How much of us, we don't allow our faith to acknowledge the one and true living God? We say that we're believers. We say that we believe the Lord, and in different scenarios, whether it be at home, whether it be at work, in our personal lives, we are very pessimistic about the things that the Lord can do, right? We cannot allow ourselves to not believe. We have to make sure that we are setting the examples of what real faith looks like. If we don't set that example, what is our purpose on this earth? Because we are telling people about a God who we can't see in the natural, but we can feel and see in the spiritual. So if our faith is not there for that, then what are we giving people? Ooh. What is faith? Hebrews 11:1, and I'm reading from the New Century Version. Faith means being sure of the things we hope for and knowing that something is real even if we do not see it. Faith means being sure of the things we hope for and knowing for something that is real even if we do not see it. How much of us are hoping for things and that we know it's real but we can't see it? How much of us are of business owners in the room? How much of us are hoping to have 1,000 clients? How much of us are hoping to secure the bag and do all the things that we're looking to do? At this moment, you know it's real, but you can't see it. You can't see it. It's not here. It's not tangible. But if you're looking for faith for revival in your business, you have to believe that it's real even though you do not see it. And I'm just going to talk about my faith journey with you guys. I live a very optimistic life. I have a lot of people that laugh at me, but not laugh like, ah, ha, 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 but it's just like, yo, bro, like, you always see the positive in things, and it's because my faith is the basis for my optimism. There's revival in everything that I'm looking to do on this earth in my life. In 2016, we went to a worship conference. The worship team, we went to a conference, and we arrived Friday night. The Saturday morning, Celeste passed out in her hotel room, and we couldn't figure out what the problem was. Didn't know what it was. But in my optimistic state, I'm just like, you know what? We've been working really hard the last couple of weeks. She's probably just really exhausted. It's exhaustion. Let's get water. Let's get rest. And then things just went from bad to worse in like 2 hours. And I'm just like, it's just me and her now in the hotel room. I'm just like, all right, Lord, I believe. So, you know, let's do this. And then it just went from worse to dire, right? And so to the point, Corral, my brother, he was with me, and we were just like, all right, let's put her in a wheelchair. Let's drive her to the hospital, and, you know, we'll take her from there. It got to the point where we couldn't even do that. It was just every time she would move or do something, she'd just pass out. And so we had to the hotel called 911 for us, and the EMT came, they took her to the hospital. We get to the hospital, and there's I want to say 8 or 9 liters of blood just swimming in her stomach. And we're just like, all right, cool. All right, we're here at the hospital. This is what you guys get paid to do. You know, let's work it out. Come to find out, it was an ectopic pregnancy. We didn't know she was pregnant. And if you know what an ectopic pregnancy is, it means that there we go, thank you. And with that, she had to have emergency surgery. This was Saturday. We went into the hospital Saturday afternoon, right? It was an ordeal. I ended up deciding to go to one of the last sessions at the conference just to stir my faith, build my faith, because I'm just like, I can't have my wife going through this and I don't believe. So I needed to be in a room with other believers where I could have my faith built and rise up, right? So that Saturday night, we go back to the hospital, and Celeste was hooked up to a ventilator. And it was one of those things where it just didn't feel good. It was scary because, yeah. And so we ran errands. But here's the funny part, right? Before we left, Celeste was on the ventilator, and she's doing like this. So she wanted to get a pen and a paper to write to us. And I was like, all right, Lord. That's a sign. That's a good sign. Then we left. And then I received a phone call from a stranger. I'm like, yo, who's calling me from an unknown number? You know, these scam likelies. I pick up the phone. Hello, are you okay? I'm like, what? And it's Celeste. Just hours before, hooked up to a ventilator. And who knew, right? So Sunday comes, and we go to the hospital early, run errands, get her clothes, get her all these things, because I'm believing we going home. Pastor's just like, yo, do you want us to buy a flight, for you guys to fly? I'm just like, no, Pastor, we are going home in our car. Hours later, Celeste walked out of the hospital. Nurses, doctors, standing there weeping, just like, we've never seen this before. We've never seen anything like this before. And I honestly believe, when I think about that situation, if I did not have the faith or the expectation that the Lord can do something, it would have never been done. As the head of my house, if I didn't have faith for revival in that moment, that would not have been done. So faith for revival is just not applicable to the building of the church. We all need faith for revival in all areas of our life. Last week, I heard a preacher say this, and it really stirred me. It says, expectation releases a sound and a signal and an alarm to heaven to let heaven know that I'm not done. I want more. So when we refuse to adopt an expectation, we dismiss the possibilities of the future. How much of us are not spending enough time sending that alarm to heaven, telling the Lord that we want more? How much of us are not actually expecting the Lord to do more, and we're just sitting there on mute, doubting ourselves, living in anxiety, living with all these things because we're afraid, or we refuse to cry out to the Lord and send that alarm and say, Lord, here I am, I want more. Because when we do that, the possibilities of the future are immense. They're great, because that's the God that we serve. And let's talk about faith for revival, right? Faith for revival starts in, I think, one of the biggest ways when it comes to serving or just being a faith-based believer: giving. We can't expect faith for revival in our finances when we're afraid to give the Lord what's really His. If we really want faith for revival in our finances, we got to buck up, have faith, trust the Lord, give His 10%, and know that everything will be taken care of. I got a laundry list of testimonies about, by making that decision, living in faith with my finances, that I'm in a position that I am now to receive the things that I'm receiving now. It's because I believe for faith for revival in my finances. And it's not just, okay, I'm in a good place now, let me not have faith for revival. I'm a $1 million baby out here. I'm receiving and I'm looking for more. So my faith for revival for my finances is on fleek because I want that $1 million baby blessing. So if you're struggling with that, I want to tell you, have faith for revival in your finances. You know, you give, you pray over your check, you pray over your bank account, and you say, Lord, whatever you have for me, I receive it. Give me the wisdom that I need to navigate all these expenses that I'm dealing with. If I'm struggling paying my rent, Lord, I believe that you say that you'll provide. You're going to provide for me. I'm looking for revival in this situation right now, Lord, and I need your help. Funny thing about God is He can do any and everything. He's not going to do nothing if we don't ask. If we don't ask, we can't receive. So He could, at the snap of a finger, release whatever we need to be released. But if we're not saying, yo, Lord, I need this, it's not happening. Oof, yes, Lord. What do we do when we receive revival? I'm not going to read the whole passage, but Genesis chapter 22. Abraham and Sarah were praying and believing forever, because they were really old, forever, for a son. Right? Forever. And then the Lord went ahead and blessed them with Isaac. Right? And then verse 1 says, God tested Abraham and said to Abraham, and said to him, Abraham, and then He said, here I am. Take now your son, your only, I like how they put that in, they italicized it, your only son, Isaac, whom you love, and go to the land of Moriah and offer him there as a burnt offering on one of the mountains which I shall tell you. So they went early in the morning. He took 2 men with him. And on the 3rd day, they went, and Abraham said to his young men, stay here with the donkey, and Isaac and I are going to go and we're going to worship, and then we'll come back to you. So even though the Lord told him, take and sacrifice your son, he believed that we will go and worship, and we're going to come back to you. We will come back to you, right? So they went, they built the fire, they had the knife, and they went. And Isaac said, Father. Abraham said, here I am, son. Look, the fire and the wood, but where is the lamb for the burnt offering? My son, Faith, God will provide for himself the lamb for a burnt offering. So the 2 of them went together. Then they came to the place of which God had told him. And Abraham built an altar there and placed the wood in order. And he bound Isaac his son, laid him on the altar upon the wood. And Abraham stretched out his hand and took the knife to slay his son. But then the angel of the Lord called to him from heaven and said, Abraham, Abraham. He said, here I am. He said, do not lay your hand on the lad or do anything to him. Now I know you fear God, since you have not withheld your son, your only son, from me. Then Abraham lifted his eyes and looked, and there behind him was a ram caught in a thicket by its horns. So Abraham went and took the ram and offered it up for a burnt offering instead of his son. And Abraham called the name of the place, the Lord will provide. As it is said to this day, in the mount of the Lord it shall be provided. Revival isn't free. Once we receive revival, we're going to be called to give back. We're going to be called to do more. We're going to be called to give more, pour more, and as I said in the definition earlier, restore something back to its previous condition. But our faith and our level of trust can never be diminished. When we restore something back to its previous condition, I love to watch HGTV. That is my joint. Hometown, Fixer Upper, all these, this is my shows, right? They revive these homes. In the areas where they live, they are reviving these homes to look like its previous condition. These are homes that are extremely beautiful. Whoever didn't have them before, didn't value them, or just things happened in the past. And so when they get these homes, they're reviving them to their previous condition, right? And so you want the house, you get the house, now you have to revive the house, right? You have the faith, you receive what it is you're looking for, now we have to do more and now spread revival and restore other things to its previous condition. That's how we're building our faith for revival, right? And then faith goes hand in hand with trust. I can't have faith in something if I don't trust it. So I can't have faith for revival if I don't trust in the Lord. Proverbs 3:3-5 says, trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge him, and he's going to direct your path. Faith for revival is not only just trusting in the Lord, but also knowing that he's going to direct you in the right direction. Faith is the basis of what it is we're looking to do, where we want to go ahead and have the Lord direct us and put us in places where we can be of influence and restore things to its previous condition. That is faith for revival. You know, one of the things that I've learned in life is that with faith, there's sacrifices. Because we're believing something but we're giving up something else that may block what we're believing for. And so we have to sacrifice that thought, that condition. We want faith in our finances. We got to sacrifice going out with the girls one night. We got to sacrifice going out to dinner or doing whatever it is we want to do. There's some level of sacrifice that we have to give to endure to get the faith for revival that we're looking for. And so a lot of us, what are we willing to sacrifice for our faith? What are we willing to sacrifice for revival? What are we willing to give up to tell the Lord that, you know what, God, this is more important than this, or this is more important than that. I'm totally surrendering everything that I have because I want revival in my life. You know, we can't have revival in our marriages and restored to the previous condition of being fully in love if we are going to bed turning our backs on one another. Right? We can't have revival, you know, in relationships with family members if we if we see them and we turn up our nose and roll our eyes at them. Right? We can't have revival I talked about this already, in our finances, if we are living a life that we know we can't maintain. Faith revival is always being in a place of willing to sacrifice. I'm going to read one more passage, and what I'm going to talk about after I read this passage is how lack of faith can delay revival. Right? So if you are in your Bible, you can go ahead and go to Mark chapter 9. There's Mark chapter 9, yeah. Yep, and I'm going to be starting from verse 14. And I'm going to read this one. I like it in the New King James Version. All right. So starting from verse 14. Playing with me. Sorry, y'all. I can tell I'm not a real preacher because, you know, I can't transition between the Bible and my notes like, you know. See, the devil don't want me to read this because every time it loads up, it's just like, nah. But we're going to read this because this is going to help somebody today. All right, let's try. Just read it from my Bible on my phone. It's already pulled up too. Come on. All right. And I'm reading it from the New Living Translation, actually. So they had went out. Jesus and the disciples had went out, and then Jesus went off to pray. And then he came back, and this is what happened. When they returned to the other disciples, they saw a large crowd surrounding them. And some teachers of religious law were arguing with them. When the crowd saw Jesus, they were overwhelmed with awe. So they ran in to greet him. Jesus said, "What are you all arguing about?" One of the men in the crowd spoke up and said, "Teacher, I brought my son to you so you could heal him. He is possessed by an evil spirit that won't let him talk. And whenever the spirit seizes him, it throws him violently to the ground. Then he foams at the mouth and grinds his teeth and becomes rigid. So I asked your disciples to cast out the evil spirit, but they couldn't do it." Jesus said to them, "You faithless people, how long must I be with you? How long must I put up with you? Bring the boy to me." So they brought the boy, but when the evil spirit saw Jesus, it threw the child into a violent convulsion, and he fell to the ground, writhing and foaming at the mouth. "How long has this been happening?" Jesus asked the boy's father. He replied, "Since he was a little boy. The spirit often throws him into the fire or into the water, trying to kill him. Have mercy on us." "What do you mean?" "Have mercy on us and help us if you can." Then Jesus thug life. "What do you mean if I can? Anything is possible if a person believes." The father instantly cried, "I do believe, but help me overcome my unbelief." How much of us are believing or saying we believe in our minds, but we don't believe in our hearts? How much of us are asking the Lord to do something miraculous in our lives, to give us revival in certain areas, but we believe, but to a point. In this walk, we can't believe to a point. It's either we're all in or we're all out. And in looking for faith for revival in our lives, if you want it, the choice is to be all in. All in. Everything we do is all in. If we're not all in, we're not going to get revival. It sounds rough. It sounds tough, but that's just what it says. You know, I read this and I automatically asked myself the question, if the Father believed, how soon would have his son been healed? Because it said it was from as a little boy he was going through this issue, right? If he only believed at 100%, this is something that the Lord probably could have healed then. But it waited till the boy was a young man when he finally got his healing, because he realized that in order to believe, he had to believe wholeheartedly. And the Lord told him that. He told him because of faithlessness is why the boy hasn't been healed. I'm going to end right here. I can go on, but I just feel like the Lord wants us to have faith for revival. The Lord wants us to seek him. The Lord wants us to call out an expectation to heaven. He wants us to go ahead and let heaven know that we are receiving the possibilities for the future. We want to go ahead and we want to obtain all that the Lord has for us. As I said several times, revival is just not only in the four walls of the building. Revival doesn't only happen if pastor's up here with a mic. Revival can happen in our lives daily if we let the Lord do his thing. But in order for the Lord to do his thing, we have to have faith for it. If we don't have faith for revival, a lot of us will be living life at a deficit. I don't like deficits. I'm a very business-minded person. I don't even like to see black. Just give me green. No breaking even. I just want to see green. Right? And so if we continue to not have the faith in the things that we're seeking for, we will not have the revival that we're seeking for. And I'll say this one last thing and I'm done. Revival can happen in any place of your life if you open the door of your heart and you let the Lord in with the faith that he's requiring from us. Faith for revival. That's it. I'm done.